Okay. Sure. Thank you. It's hospitality. Hi. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. It's good to see some of you again for the second meeting. And actually a lot of the information is going to be real similar to what we shared before, but I have also quite a bit to share in terms of development that's happened in the last month since I was out here last. For anybody that's new, again, my name is Ben Meinke. I'm the superintendent, and we're fortunate enough to have at least one of our board members here tonight. We'll probably actually end up with a couple board members, and we're introducing them later in the presentation. Our purpose today is to discuss Gaines Elementary School. And some of you might say, well, why do you want to discuss Gaines Elementary School? And we're going to talk about that a little bit, but the purpose for tonight is really just to information share, let you provide some input, and also for us to hear from you just about your ideas and thoughts on Gaines Elementary. So I'm going to talk again a little bit about our recent history. I'm going to talk about why we're talking about Gaines Elementary School. You may or may not know why we would want to bring this up, and so I'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about some solutions or ideas. We're going to go over the updated plan, which there's a lot of new information from last time that we met, and some action steps. So for the last part of the meeting, we're going to create a space and an opportunity for you to provide some input as well. We'll whiteboard any new ideas. We have quite a few that we took from the first meeting, some of which I'll talk about tonight and how we're able to incorporate some of those. But again, the purpose for today is to talk, brainstorm, share ideas, and then discuss what's coming next. So, and again, for some of you this will be review, for others it'll be the second time through. For some it will be the second time through, but for others it will be the first time you're seeing it. So bear with me for those of us that are seeing this for the first time. Back in 2015 was the last time that the district formally had discussions about closing Gaines Elementary School. At our last meeting, there was some debate about that because people were saying, well, that's talked about every year. When I say that we've talked about it, that's formally talked about it from the district staff perspective. It's certainly possible and probable, in fact, I know that it's probably been talked about amongst certain community members. So a neighbor says this is what they're going to do, but the neighbor doesn't necessarily have good information or know exactly what's going to happen. So the district, the last time we talked about this was 2015. It was before I was the superintendent. There were 235 students at that time, had about 10 teachers, plus additional support staff, plus a full-time principal. From there, the board at the time, after having many, many meetings, there was a thing called the FEED committee. For those of you that remember, that was not a real positive thing from what I've heard, but they had a committee that came together, and the board at the time decided to vote to keep the building open, and they told the residents at the time that they hope the enrollment trends change, obviously, because if the enrollment trends didn't change, that we would have to talk about this again in the future. The future happened to be this year. Was the next time that we brought it up, and it's being brought up because of enrollment, and we'll talk about that in a second, but this was back in 2015. So for the last 5-6 years, there's been no discussion on closing Gaines from the district. We've been very supportive. My argument since I've been here, been very supportive of Gaines, on top of the fact that it's a great school, has a lot of amazing programming, and it's arguably our nicest elementary school if you think about size, space. I mean, even this facility here in the gym, our other elementary schools are like a cafe gymnatorium combination. So there's a lot of really great things about this building, student achievement. My argument has always been, it doesn't make a lot of financial sense when you have a building with declining enrollment when you get to a certain point. But at the same time, if you close a building and you lose all those students, you're not really ahead. So why would you want to go through that? And so that's been my conversation, up to this point. Unfortunately, we have had a consistent enrollment decline since 2015, and we've cut that number almost in half. We're looking at about 120 students enrolling in the building for next year. So with that being said, again, I'm not doing my job as a superintendent if I'm not informing the board, hey, this is an issue structurally that's going to have to be discussed. And, maybe that's all that happens, is that it's a discussion. But that has been how we got to this point. So I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker today, because I know we're about probably 60-40. 60% of you were here the first time and have heard these. For those of you that have not heard these, you're going to see them for the first time. If you have a question, go ahead and stop me on a technical point. I will make sure there's time for you to ask questions, though, at the end. So what we've pulled together are 5 possible scenarios. And there are like 100 possible scenarios. So these are not the only scenarios. So I don't want you to think I'm giving you these 5 and it has to be one of these. The board could choose to do a bazillion additional things. This is not just the only thing, okay? But this is just me giving you some ideas to ponder and think about. These ideas range from doing more to support Gaines Elementary School from a financial standpoint to doing significantly less. And so it ranges from, staffing it further to closing it completely, and every continuum in between. So I'm going to go through these today. But first of all, running a building under capacity leads to tremendous inefficiencies and inequities across the entire district. So when you ask why are we bringing this up, it's not because we don't like Gaines. We love Gaines. But we also love all the other kids in the district, and we have to think about equity and equality across the district. So if I'm looking at a student that's going to elementary school at Elms Road Elementary School or Deke Elementary School or Morris or Cyrene and Gaines, are they having a somewhat comparable experience? And if the kid is in a classroom with 24 students, okay, and then there's another kid in a classroom with 30, that's not the same experience. And if I can't balance those out, we have a situation that's very difficult to rectify. Furthermore, if I'm in a situation where I'm running a building under capacity, okay, and this building is significantly underutilized, we have other issues that come into play, like the district and the rest of the schools have to offset that deficiency to be able to financially have it make sense. So I want to stress something, that while finances are one major part of this conversation, it's not the only part of the conversation, but that's part of what the problem is here. We have a lot of class size variance across the district. One thing that I didn't really kind of talk about as well, and this is going to be the case for this year, we've run different variations of split classrooms. For some kids running in a split classroom means that I would have like a 3rd grade and a 4th grade classroom to combine. So I would have a 3-4 split. For some cases, that's actually really good for some kids. They thrive in that type of environment. For a lot of kids, it's really problematic, and it's also really problematic for certain staff members. Certain staff members struggle to try and teach 2 curricula at the same time. But if I'm thinking about equity, if I've got a kid at, again, Morris Elementary School that's got 1 class of 1st grade kids, the kids at Gaines are not getting a comparable experience because they're having their teacher have to split time between multiple grades, if they're in a split setting. And so that also is a situation on the opposite. So I'm getting now into, talked about the problem, why we're having this conversation. I want to discuss for a second, 5 possible scenarios. So the first one is on one end of the spectrum, and that is to fully staff and run Gaines. And it says no change, but it actually would be a significant change because we would try to run just 1 teacher at every class, at every grade level. It would be an additional cost. If we were to get back to fully doing this, It would result in extremely low class sizes and the opportunity to continue in the building. The Gaines Village would fully realize, the building for its use. So that's a huge benefit, the idea of actually fully staffing the building. The data that would support that is significantly low discipline data if we were able to fully staff the building. It's also a very high-performing school, Blue Ribbon School back in 2015, I think, 16. So there's a lot of reasons, in the data, in terms of achievement and all of those things that play a role in why, you might want to do this idea. What are some possibilities that could happen with this idea? Well, lots of small groups for the Gaines students. There's a tremendous ratio of staff to students, and we can continue to pilot different programs. So for example, if I've got a class of 12 or 14 kids, I can really do some pretty cool things and run some different pilot type programs doing that. And there's a ton of resources to support that in terms of human resource, people to kids, and a much lower staff to student ratio. And by the way, these little bullets I'm going to bring up for every single scenario. So they're going to be, how would this idea impact our students or community? What data supports the idea? What are some of the possibilities that could happen? And then the fourth one that I'll ask for each one, what are some of the drawbacks that could come with this idea? This would cause the district to have to add an additional 2.5, to actually more like 3.5 staff members due to class breakdown. It would result in further inequity with other elementary schools in the district. It would run tremendously costly to the district with the building continue to run further into the red. So when I say running into the red, a building in itself has to be able to run itself, meaning that when you look at the cost to run the building, it's not just the people that are in that building. It's also the district has expenses like their energy bills. They have expenses like their attorney fees and litigation costs and insurance and liability and all of these things that if your building is not running significantly into the black, then those things are going to have to be subsidized by other parts of the district. So the more that an individual building runs into the red, it's actually compounded pretty significantly. So those are some of the negatives. Financial impacts. So these are based on scenarios, and I want to be clear, I don't have a magic ball. I cannot possibly tell you exactly what every single penny is going to be, but I'm going to put these up here and I'll talk through them so that you can understand them. They look real similar for each one. The numbers just change a little bit. So number one, we're using our revenue of $8,111 per student. That number has changed even in the last month. But we're using it to compare apples to apples here. So back in 2019, we had 139 students, okay? And so our baseline, was about $1.1 million for this building. In 2021, we're going to use the same number, 120 students, so we're down about 19 kids from that year, which puts us at, $973,000, about a loss of $150,000 from 2019. Okay, so in this fully staffed Gaines, we obviously anticipate no student loss. We probably would see even kids coming here if, they knew that it was fully staffed with that. So difficult to project. We're projecting no loss of students. And so from that, you have some expenditures. So your instructional program, your special ed, your administration and support, operations, and community ed costs, which there would be no community ed costs in this particular idea. So in this particular example, okay, the building is going to run a loss of about $113,000. So that's what the cost to the district is. Seems kind of low because you look at like our budget and we have a $40 million budget, so it's like, well, what the heck, just subsidize that. Again, in addition to all of this direct cost to run the building, you also have all of the district costs, and none of those are being covered or even accounted for in this number. This is just strictly at this building. So if you're running into the negative at all, it's really bad. This plan would run us over $100,000 into the red. So let's take a look at a couple other ideas. Idea number 2 is running Gaines with splits. This is actually very similar to what we're going to be running for this next year. How would this impact the community? Building would stay open, fully usable. Students would have class sizes more like their peers across the district. So this would kind of right-size the classes. So you're not going to have a kid in a class of 14 anymore. You're going to have kids in classes of 26, 27, 28, up to 30. We typically don't like to go more than 30 unless it's a 5th grade class in which we could push the envelope. We don't have any over 30 right now across the district, but or this past year we didn't. Students would have to learn in a split class format, and so that would likely remain the norm moving forward. I mean, if the building continued to shrink, you get to a point where you're either running multiple splits where it's becoming almost like a one-room type of a schoolhouse, or you have these, you're running this type of a more efficient schedule. There's a lot less financial strain in the district budget. You're able to balance kids and staff district-wide, and learning in a multi-age classroom can be beneficial for some kids. That there's something to be said for a high-achieving 3rd grader that can learn with 4th grade peers. There are some benefits for some kids on that. What are some possibilities? Innovative multi-age classroom model, more district-wide supports or opportunities. So when you think about this particular plan, compared to fully staffing it, we could do more with our support for the building. And of course, the drawback continues to be challenges to teachers and kids who do not fare well in a split classroom. It's likely going to result in some loss of students and families, and there's obviously few staff in the building. And we experienced that this past year. We've actually experienced it the last couple years. So this idea has some points there. Did you have a question? Sorry. Yeah, so if we're not spending as much money as we did in the previous model, then we can afford to say, maybe we're going to add another aide, or we're going to add another trauma-informed care specialist. Or correct, yeah. 85% of our budget is held up in people. It's staffing. So, yep, it's a great question. So the financial impacts, of course, this looks real similar. You drop that number down in terms of how much the loss is down to about $22,000, which is still pretty significant because, again, your building has to be running in the black to support fully running the building. But this is a whole lot better, and the district doesn't have to subsidize quite as much cost. Idea number 3 is to run gains as a 3-5 building only. That would assume that we were going to close the building at a certain period of time. So we would say, okay, we're going to run the building as a 3-5 building for one more year, let the kids have one more year in the building, and then we would close it. This idea has zero support. So there wasn't anybody that liked this idea. I'm just going to kind of go quickly through it. Did you have a question right now? Okay. Yeah.
We used to run a community center here after the evening where there was money generated by renting out the gym. Did we ever figure out what that revenue was for renting out the gym?
I don't have that number. All I can tell you is that it's not significant.
We didn't do it last year. That was my question. We didn't do it last year. We had them in years past.
Yep.
Every night. So I just wondered what the revenue was.
Rental fees, our fee schedule can be found online, and we could probably even do some analysis and projections like where that money came in. So the challenge that we ran into, I'll just tell you because when I asked this question, the challenge that we ran into is that money across the district for facilities goes into that pot. And so it's not necessarily always accounted and said, but I want to know the Gaines gym specifically, like how much that one brought in. So, but we could figure it out if you just looked at the rental fee schedule and then kind of extrapolated it out. It's not earth-shattering money, but it's something for sure. Yep. So I think that it may be worth a little bit more digging to find out, what would that revenue look like over the course of a year if you had it rented out, say, 3 nights a week or 4 nights a week, what would that net out in terms of financials? So this idea does not have a lot of support, but I'll just say this is basically if you're going to shut the building down in a year, okay, you could let the upper elementary kids move the early L over to their new buildings. So there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate with Deacon Elms in that case because it would also be a 3-5 building. A lot of the teachers are doing the same things. Same thing with the other one, lower discipline data. You could have a situation where you're able to kind of pool resources and you have fewer staff members, but they're going to be more singular focused. And then this only, again, addresses the problem temporarily, and then you're going to be back in the same situation in the not too distant future. Financially, it actually doesn't cost the district at this point. Now you're finally getting into the black a little bit. So that's all positive, but this particular idea I probably will take out of the presentation, but just wanted to put it up there because we did talk about it in the last meeting. Yeah?
Is there any reason why you went 3 through 5 instead of K through 2?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I answer that, let me just remind you that these are totally not the answers. They're just like, there's so many hundreds of possibilities. So you could say, well, what if you did it as a K1-2, right, instead, or K2, or however you wanted to do it. The reason why I suggested 3-5 is because K1-2 kids typically don't have an attachment to a building. 3 through 5 kids often do, right? So when we did the elementary model shift, the kids that struggled the most were the kids that, say, were at Moorish Elementary School that then had to go to Elms Road Elementary School. I don't want to say that there was this mass struggle, but that would have been the kids that were more prone to struggling because they're more attached to the familiarity of a building. So we thought, okay, if you had kids that were in grades 3 through 5, maybe you give them that one last, opportunity to finish through the building, but you could absolutely have the other.
Like I had a virtual kindergartner and what will be an in-person first grader, and then if he doesn't change, he'll have been to a preschool, stay at home, come to games, then get shifted to a school for only second grade,
Yeah.
to a second or fifth school, whatever,
Yeah.
third, fourth, fifth, and it's just so many
Yep.
options for a little kid to take, and so I feel like
100%.
what happens to the little guys too.
Yeah. Well, and in this scenario, the little guys would have a home. It just wouldn't be here in this scenario, right? And so, but certainly for the little ones, especially, being in person is very important. We found that out through the pandemic. So, parents made decisions based on what was best for their families, but we find that the biggest struggle were the little ones. Because a 5th grader, and certainly a high school or middle school kid, they can handle logging in and managing that much better than a 1st grader can, right? So certainly getting more of our kids back into buildings this fall is very exciting and going to be a priority for us. Idea 4 starts to get into more significant change. And so idea 4 is to close Gaines, but to open a community center here in this building. So how would this impact the community? Well, the building would remain fully open as a community asset. However, the students would be dispersed to other elementary schools in the district. So in this scenario, it would cease to operate as an elementary school during the school day. It would operate as a community center. You could have pickleball, you could have adult education, you could still run your early childhood classes like Head Start. You would have the opportunity to have computer lab possibilities, and that way the building could be maintained as a community asset. There's tremendous benefit to the district budget in terms of the data, because obviously this more efficiently places our children in classes where they're going to fit into the operation. And then those operational efficiencies are significantly, increased. What are some of the possibilities that could happen? Early childhood programming and community ed programs could become an anchor in the community. You could do a lot of different things with that. I think obviously if you drive around, and I've been through the village, I know Melissa's very involved here, obviously. This is a pretty important piece to this village, and so being able to keep it for that perspective allows for something powerful. There are some drawbacks. Certainly it would result in a loss of students. There's no doubt if the building closes as an elementary school, there are going to be families that leave or choose to send their kids to Byron or other districts. You know, if they say, I want to go to Gaines, and if I can't go to Gaines, I'm sending them somewhere else. And students would be attending an elementary school, in some cases, further away from their house. So that might mean that they're, you know, on a bus longer, or they can't walk to school. Those are factors, right? So those are some of the drawbacks that would be there. I will say, for some students that attend Gaines Elementary School, they would be actually significantly closer to other elementary schools than they are to Gaines. But that is a unique situation that we're in here. So the fourth impact, we add the community ed cost, which is basically going to be a coordinator that we would have to staff to be out here to run things, because the district still has to be operated. So it's still going to need to be cleaned, it's still going to need to be operated, it's still going to need to have those things, and then we're going to need to have a person out here, at least part-time, to help with the costs. So we are estimating about 35 student loss, which is a massive reduction. That would be a big loss if the building closed. And so obviously with that reduction, coming down to 85 students, if you look at the operating surplus or loss, now the district significantly flips to almost a $500,000 surplus in this particular decision. Moving on to number 5, close Gaines completely. It's not a community center, it's boarded up. We, lock the doors and we figure out what to do next. That idea has a lot of drawbacks, but I will talk about the impact to the kids. The building would close, have to be maintained, the heat in the winter and security, but would not be open, so community would lose the asset. Students would be dispersed to other elementary schools in the district. The financial impact is the greatest, allowing a lot of other possibilities district-wide. However, the possibilities for this is more support and educational opportunities for all students in the district or other buildings. What are the drawbacks that could come with this idea? Significant change to the Gaines community. I mean, if the building isn't even open as a community asset, it would result in a loss of kids, but it would also be a big drawback to the community as a whole. And so this one obviously has opposite end of the spectrum from idea 1. If you look at the financial impacts, over $500,000, about $542,000 to the good every year. When you think about that kind of money, when it compounds over a couple years, you're talking about millions of dollars. And so that is significant. It's not the only reason that we're talking about it, but it's a big reason that we're talking about it. So now what I want to do, before I talk a little bit further with you and engage the conversation, I want to talk about the updated plan and action steps. So since our meeting a month ago, we had a board meeting shortly following that, and actually I have a couple board members here I'm going to introduce in just a second. And they actually voted, and we have kind of a lot of updated information about what's coming and what we're going to be doing for this next year. So at the June 23rd board meeting, the board voted to keep Gaines Elementary open for the 2021 school year. And at that time, the decision was that they voted on a resolution that would set the end of March of this coming school year as the deadline to make a decision on Gaines Elementary School. That's the latest date they would make a decision on the future of Gaines. So what that means is we are full force planning and running Gaines for the entire school year next year as a K-5 elementary school, okay? So similar to what we've done in the past few years, we're fully running the building, and I'll talk about a couple logistics of what that might look like. But the board is going to have discussion and a vote by the end of March on what they will do in terms of Gaines' future, right? So one of these scenarios, again, it could be one of 100 different ones of these scenarios or different iterations. It may not have anything to do with these scenarios, but the point is they're going to do that by the end of March. So school will start in full force. We're going to continue to monitor and evaluate the data, achievement, ideas, and input throughout the school year. We will have formal town hall meetings scheduled like these. They'll be a little bit different, but we're going to schedule them here for input in the late fall and winter. Just so you have a little bit of an expectation, we will be back out here. I mean, I'm out here during the week at different times, but we'll be out here to meet formally as a community in the late fall, early winter, again, to start, discussions, ideas, and those types of things. So that gives you a little bit of an idea kind of what to expect. This year, we're going to be running a semi-split schedule, or it's actually a full split schedule. It looks right now, and this is all going to depend on enrollment. So like enrollment trends change, and I have a couple other things to say on that. So we'll be running splits this year. We've run splits in the past. It works. Some families don't like it. Some families love it. There's very few people in between, unfortunately, but we are going to be running a split class schedule. And those things can change. We are also going to be sending a survey out across the district. This was an idea that we had at the last meeting. So the district will be sending out a survey to all parents by the end of this month, and it's basically going to ask this. Gaines Elementary School is available, always has been, for students to go and attend. And you're welcome to have your student go to Gaines Elementary School. And so basically what we're saying is, do you want to send your kid out to Gaines? If you do, let us know. And so that survey is going to be going out shortly. There will be people possibly that decide to send their children here that might be in a different part of the district. And if that's the case, that could impact those numbers and splits again. I mean, if we don't have to run splits, you don't run splits, but we just can't afford to run classes of 12 or 14 kids. So that's the bottom line on that one. So again, this is, I think, actually excellent news. Jack Sayers here, I'm going to introduce him. Alicia Gardner's here. They're both members of our Board of Education. They had a very good discussion as a board. I think Jack actually brought the idea up of let's wait. And Alicia was in full support of that as well. I think it was an excellent way to kind of say, look, we can't make any rush decisions. We're going to think about this. We're going to, look at how the year starts, see if anything can rebound, and then we're going to take a look at it in March. So I think that gives everybody an opportunity to kind of catch their breath, think about, this next year, you're good to go. But it is going to be something that we come back to in March. And as I said, in the late fall, early winter, we'll be having some of those things. So I'd like to open it up for questions, comments, and inputs, and then I'd like to allow the board members, I'm going to introduce them to you, and if they want to say anything, give them an opportunity as well. So questions, comments, input for tonight. Katie, if you could take notes on any ideas that people have, or if there are just things that you would like to ask about anything that I've said tonight, or anything that you may have heard, up at Gaines Bar or anything like that. So, all right. It's a restaurant, I apologize.
We call it a restaurant.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, so there was talk about bringing in an E5 here and doing the 5K splits, and now I see you've got a K1, 2, 3. Are we not doing an E5 split?
Yeah, so it all is going that one is all up in the air.
Okay.
So we are, at this point, not planning on it. However, if we have a group of people that decide to come into the district that are, say, 4 years old or early 5 birthdays, and they say, well, we're enrolling in kindergarten. So you have to be kindergarten age for an E5s program, but a lot of times what happens is we do what's called a kindergarten readiness assessment. It's a KRA, and what we do is we look at kids and we say, okay, this particular child would benefit from a growth year, right? Like one more, and sometimes it has nothing to do with academics. It might just be they've never been around other kids before, right? And so having that early 5 program is option anywhere, and we would always look at where is there actually the numbers to support it. it's unlikely that you're going to have out of I think there are 16 kindergartners signed up, enough to run a class of E5. So I don't think that that's likely. In the event that, say, we had 15 additional students that enrolled that were kindergarten age and maybe had early birthdays, we would run an early fives 100%. I mean, it's a great program. We're running multiple sections at Morris and Cyrene because obviously they have the numbers to support that. So there's no reason why we wouldn't run it, but it is kind of numbers dependent. You know, if you've only got 16 children in kindergarten, you don't have enough to split that pot even further, if that makes sense. It's a great question. Yes?
Okay, the splits that you're talking about?
Yep.
A couple of questions on that. One, how is it determined which kids go in which step? Like, let's say for the 2-3 and the 3-4.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question for everybody else was, how do you determine where kids go in these splits, right? If you have a 2-3 and a 3-4, how do you determine who would go to the different groups? So mostly that's determined by ability groupings, and we have screeners that kind of would say, hey, you're reading, which is our primary tool to kind of determine literacy. We would say you're reading kind of at or just on the bubble or below grade level, so it makes more sense that you go here. You know, that's not the only qualifier though. So this is usually a conversation. Mrs. Preer would have conversations with families and there would be some discussion. The teachers have a lot of role in that because the teachers are going to say, kid by kid, right? This particular child would fare better in this environment, right? And this particular child would fare better in this environment. So we hand schedule most all of our elementary children. So what that means is that we think about where they're placed versus at the high school and middle school, we do a lot more computer scheduling, right? They go into a schedule and then they get spun around and it's a mystery where their classes come from. It's not that way at the elementary, so we would be looking child to child. So for those 120 kids, makes a lot of sense. And it might be that you're sitting at like 26 kids in a 3-4 split, and you might be sitting at 25 kids at a 2-3 split, but you say, we'd rather go up to 27, even though it's a bigger class, we'd rather have that child in that group. And that's usually a conversation between the teacher, the principal, and the parents. Yep, good question. So we'll go here, here, and there. Okay?
I don't know the information, but is there a lot of districts that offer like a dual language? Like, I know a lot of teachers have like a minor in Spanish or French or something.
Yep.
Is there a lot of impact on the district to start something like that in elementary schools, or would it simply be the teacher's responsibility?
Great question. So the question was, what are the financial costs to say starting a language program at the elementaries, and what is that financial cost? That kind of your question? Okay. So this year we are starting something that actually started here at Gaines. So Gaines a few years ago started running an integrated specials schedule where the kids, it wasn't just music, it wasn't just art, so kids had a multitude of different specials that they got, including modern agriculture and STEM. This year at our other elementary schools, they're going to adopt that same model. So we will have 5 specials, just like Gaines has had, but that'll be taught. We actually will have elementary teachers teaching STEM in the other buildings. So it would be the same concept as that, right? So the district would say, we want to invest in, say, world language, and maybe it's Spanish because that's usually our top enrolled language that we get. So maybe they would say, okay, we're going to run art, PE, music, and Spanish for our specials at the elementary school, right? That would be about the same cost as running a STEM, program. So our district, very STEM focused, invests a lot in that. We have chosen to go in that direction. It's really, you would go to another district and they may say, well, we invest in, this language program. So to answer your question bluntly, it's the cost of a teacher, right? So if you have, for example, at Elms and Morris, we had to hire, we're adding a STEM teacher to be able to teach that elective to all the kids. At Gaines, it would require us to really ensure that whoever was the specials teacher had that endorsement and could actually teach that program. And then how would they make sure that the kids got that into their schedule throughout the week? And so typically, you don't want to run more than 5, because 5 days a week you can get a special on every day, if you will. So, I guess it could cost you nothing if the teacher that's here happens to be that and you choose not to do that. We've made a decision not to have like the Gaines kids and the Moorish and Cyrene and Elms and Deet kids get a different special experience. So we're going to have them all have STEM. They're going to have PE. They're going to have music. They're going to have our, it's more integrated here because you have one person who's kind of teaching that integrated approach. But you could do that with language as well if that was the way that you wanted to go. So.
So we could be like a starter school that
Yeah, no, so the idea, I think the idea is, could Gaines start a language program that would draw people? That's kind of what you're saying, right? The answer is yes, absolutely could. We started the Modern Ag program, Katie, 2 years ago, thinking that would be kind of so the way that started actually was that we had some grants and also some interest among parents. You may or may not know this, but a vastly large number of kids from Gaines Elementary School never go to our middle school. And that's problematic, right? And so why is that? Well, myriad of reasons. Some of the reasons have to do with they wanted more of an agricultural-based curriculum. We don't have that at our upper buildings, but we were going to offer that here. So we started that thinking, okay, well, this will draw some kids. It didn't really work out that way, but it has been a really cool program. And if you've ever been able to go out to see, when they bring the trailer in and everything else, it's an amazing thing. I think it's a great program. So, but absolutely, you could do things like that where it's like, okay, we're going to do this, which is a little different. And then maybe parents would say, I want to send my kid to that. So definitely an opportunity, potentially. So make sure you put that down. Okay. Yes? Sure.
So the question is for the email going out to all the parents of Swartz Creek about the interest in some things. Are we going to highlight some of the things that, make Gaines so special? Maybe the blue ribbon, maybe some of our smaller class sizes. Is there a possibility of a blessing for these parents? I'm just wondering some of the things that might be included in this email.
Yeah. So the question was, when I send the email, is the email going to highlight the positives and, to try and entice people marketing-wise, right, to come? I'm going to give you an answer that you probably aren't going to like, and I'll explain my answer, okay? So what you have to remember is that we have to think about all schools in the district. Gaines Elementary School is a great school. So is every other elementary school.
Without putting down the other ones, you can still
Absolutely. Yep. That absolutely. So we will mention it's a 3-5, right? So for people that want that, K5. For the people that want that full, integrated school, maybe they didn't want to send their kids to an earlier upper, we did that already. We actually did that when we first did the elementary model, but we're going to do that again. So we're going to remind people, hey, this is a K-5 building, so if you really want that, you can have that experience. Blue ribbon school, all those things. What we want to be very careful of, though, is that we're not saying, leave those podunk schools and go to the best school, right? That's kind of a difficult thing to say, because I don't believe that that's true. I do believe that Gaines is a great school, but it's like, do you ever tell your kid, I tell my kids, you're my favorite on different days, but do you really ever tell your kids, you're my favorite one and I don't like you as much, right? You don't do that. And so we're going to be very careful about how we would word that to say it's way better over here than it is over there. Certainly we could say, it's a K-5 model, because that's a fact, right? And we could say, hey, smaller knit community, that's a fact. We could say modern ag program. We can do all of that. But the intent is to make people aware and give them that opportunity more than it is to try and coerce them or entice them away from other facilities that are doing very well. And you have to also consider, how do the teachers and the staff and the parents in those other buildings feel like, well, I guess we're just leftovers over here, and we don't get, so it's about supporting gains, but supporting gains means that we give them equal opportunity, right? And so
I guess the main purpose also the opportunity for busing.
yeah, so that's really, really tricky. We have a strained bus crew. If you don't know this, there aren't a lot of people signing up to be bus drivers. We have offered thousands and thousands of dollars in incentives. We are one of the highest paid districts in Genesee County in paying drivers, and we still cannot find drivers. So as strained as our bus crew is to be able to drive out somewhere else in the district and pull people, we have done it, and we continue to do it for certain groups, but we have to draw the line in the sand somewhere. So that's why we've had to say, okay, from this boundary, even though you're in the Morris School, we'll still pick you up because we're driving by. And we can still make those arrangements. But to say we're going to drive up by Happy Elephant at Elms area and pull you down to Gaines, it's just not financially or even staff-wise possible. We don't have the infrastructure to do that. We're down to 14 drivers, 14 runs, and sometimes they have to double. That's a lot of strain on our driving crew. So we just don't have the financial or the human, even if we had the money to throw at it, we don't have bodies to drive that many buses. So it's a great idea, and we still do and will offer, and I said this the last time, and it kind of it was probably a bomb going up in my face, but we do pick up some people that are not in the Gaines area from Grand Blanc Road, and we bring them out. Well, somebody said, well, yeah, but I live over here, and you didn't pick me up, or whatever, and I was like, it's not a perfect system, but we do pick up some kids, and if it works in the route as we're basically weaving back to the building and weaving back forward. But it's a tricky thing to do. So in limited situations, yes, but I wouldn't want to promise anybody we're going to bus you anywhere. But I will tell you this, in the past and even for next year and previous years, and there's people in this room I think that can attest to this, there are people that will drive their kids. Okay, so like we have people that said, I want my kids to go to Deke Elementary School. I don't want them to go to Elms. Well, they live in the Elms area, right? Again, Elms is a great school. Deke is a great school. The point is they wanted their kid to go to Deke for whatever reason. We don't bus to Deke Elementary School from the Elms area. So that parent said, it's okay, I'm still signing up the form. I would like to do elementary choice. That's not a guarantee, but in that particular case, it balanced out our numbers, it worked. So we have people driving their kids to Deke that don't live in the Deke area. So that happens all the time, and we have a number of families where they're like, I really want my kid to go to that school, and if they can get them here, that's fine. And if we can pick them up, we will. It's just we can't guarantee that across the district. So
So then that was also my concern, and I really don't know how to fix this, but it is a concern. So I love that our board, is guaranteeing one more year, but to a lot of people, it makes it sound like it's only going to be a year. So even though we're doing an email and maybe some parents or families are interested in bringing their kids to games, I don't know. My concern is that no one would, with the idea that there's a possibility we're only going to be for 1 more year. Same with any kindergartners being enrolled into games. I mean, obviously there's parents that have to just go wherever the bus that drives by takes them. But anybody who does have a choice,
Yep.
I feel like they might be more likely to choose another school district if they don't have that guarantee.
Yep.
And I know you guys can't guarantee, but I mean, this is just a concern, and I really don't know an answer for it.
Yeah, now, I'll address it, and then when I come back, I'm going to bring because it's a great question, it's a great concern, I'm going to bring that back up for Jack and Alicia to address because they might have some insights on that. What I will say, just in real short term, if you look at it and you back yourself out, it's really difficult for us to guarantee much of anything. I cannot promise, right, that we can commit to say it absolutely will be open for 3 more years. Not really feasible. I mean, nor is it feasible for you if you're going to a job to when the boss is sitting across from you and they say, well, I want to know how long you're going to stay. You know, and you say, well, I'd like to be here for a few years. I mean, I'd like to at least be here for 3 years or 5 years. And then you have this amazing opportunity, and so you get a $50,000 raise to go work somewhere else, and the boss says, what the heck? You told me you were going to stay for 3 years. Well, life changes, circumstances change, and so it's just really difficult for the district to guarantee because there's so many unknown factors. I mean, I would like to be able to flip that around and say to, you know, will you guarantee that at least 95% of the Gaines Elementary kids are going to go to Swartz Creek Middle School? But you can't guarantee that because you're not in control of all the kids at Gaines Elementary School. And so there's a give and a take to that. And I think it's just really difficult. I can tell you this, it's entirely possible, and I don't make this decision, and I'll let Alicia and Jack address it. They are very open to the idea that the Gaines won't close, right? So we don't know what's going to happen. They're very open to whatever comes. We're going to look at the data. But I do think it's difficult for us to commit and say, absolutely, it's going to be open for 5 years, 3 years, whatever. Or for us to say it's absolutely going to close, because we just don't know that. I mean, you know, maybe the decision is, in spite of all the financial constraints, it just makes sense to just keep it going. And that's going to be the decision they make. And that's fine. You know, we have to talk about it because it's created, you know, there are some issues there. Yes?
Last time around, we had talked about why the Gaines in our million possibilities have to close in order for it to be a community center. And we talked about the option of keeping the school open and running it as a community center. And I didn't see that anywhere today. So where is that? That for me is like screaming best case scenario.
For sure, yeah.
So what happened?
Well, what happened? We know that the building is staying open for next year, so that is absolute. I will explain a little bit about our process in terms of district operation and what we're doing with that. We, for the last year and a half, have been closed due to COVID-19. That means that our cage facility, which is now completely unencumbered, meaning we can open it up to all sorts of community use, camping shows, you know, youth activities, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all sorts of different things, right? Our pool has been closed for, other than to our athletes, is now going to be open for community use. We're starting to bring back our community ed programming like karate, all those things. We're going from having nothing, right? And so we're looking at how do we financially support bringing these community resources back. We're not in a position to invest in additional community ed resources out here when we haven't even invested in them in the other parts of the district that are facilities that are currently running open and have to operate.
So would that make an option for completely, like why don't we leave it aside because you would close Gaines and make it a community center because you're saying community center is not an option at all?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because part of option number 4 is the $500,000 windfall that the district gets. So the board could say, or some iteration of this, you know what, that community cannot withstand that building closing, or I don't want to see the building boarded up, it's terrible, it's a beautiful school, we want to keep it open, we just can't afford to operate it as a K-5, but we are going to invest in it, and now the district is still saving $500,000 a year, close to, and they also can add this community ed resource out here without it costing them money. If we were to add community ed out here on top of running the building like we are now, we're going to have to add to our budget, and we haven't even opened up the cage and the pool yet. We're doing that this year. So you're asking the question, which is actually because the answer is because we don't have the money to invest in additional stuff out here. If you close the building, you have more than enough financial windfall to run a community center and still keep that vibrant while, you know, recognizing all those efficiencies.
Is there a possibility, I just saw someone make a comment on social media somewhere, is there a possibility if you guys aren't interested in
Not a realistic possibility. And that has nothing to do with anybody in Swartz Creek or in Byron. In order for that to happen, you would actually have to have the school district be annexed by a different county, because Shiawassee County and Genesee County don't play in the same ball field. So that would mean that all 21 school districts in Genesee County's boards would have to take up specific resolutions to annex this particular area of our district. It would also mean that our board would say, we're totally cool, just giving up this end of our district, which, to my knowledge, none of them are excited about that idea. But at the same point, even if they were, it's really way beyond just Swartz Creek's board and Byron's board. It's a really big, complicated and politically challenging process, because you have to have 100% participation between multiple, so all of the districts in Shiawassee County, all the districts in Genesee County, the county commissioners at both groups. I mean, it's just a massive undertaking. So it's really just never done anymore across counties. There are some situations where districts say dissolve because they just, like, a lot of times you see this in northern Michigan, maybe up in say Huron County, there's real small districts, and they're just like, it doesn't make sense for us to operate two separate districts, let's merge. But if they're in the same county, that's super easy. It's both groups, they vote on it, it happens. Can't do that across county lines. So those are some things that just make it difficult to do that. So that's kind of the technical answer. I don't know if that would help. Yes? Have the enrollment numbers gone up? I can't honestly tell you if they have or not. I was on vacation for one of those weeks, and the others, we don't expect a big surge of enrollment paperwork coming through the couple weeks of July. Where we'll start to see and be able to see data changing is in the fall, and probably the second week of August. We actually have kids start school the second week of school. Their parents bring them in and enroll them after we've been in school for 2 weeks, because they said, I saw the bus going by and I thought I should start bringing my kid to school. Okay, so just understand that's what we're dealing with, right? It's not like everybody's on the ball and like, I got to get my paperwork in, like you probably do, right? So in some cases we will. So like that second week of August, parents that are, they're going to be like, hey, I got to get there. And some are already doing it, but we'll start really looking hard at those numbers the second week of August. And we're still hiring teachers before the first week of school. I mean, we had 2 people retire last week. So I've got to fill 2 teaching spots. Well, who's looking for teaching jobs right now? They're all on vacation, right? So it's going to be a tough, and every school district deals with this, and we've unfortunately had to do it a lot the last few years. But yeah, I would say those numbers are probably going to change quite a bit in August, and so we'll start to know. And then we'll also have had that email go out, or there are other people that are doing, because we will have a sign-up sheet for elementary choice.
Because I've talked to several people that are never looking back. They were
Good.
going to leave and now they're coming back.
Good.
And they just didn't think that they had registered.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Encourage them to do that. And that's all really good information, because that's the data that the board is going to be looking at, right? So as they go into, let's say they go into March, and we're looking at our enrollment's up to 150, 160, right? It's still not good, but it's so much better than where we thought we were going to start, right? So that's going to give them a lot of pause to think about, look at where this is at. So yeah, absolutely encourage that.
They just assumed we were closing, and when I told them we weren't, then they said, well, as long as you're still open.
Yeah, I will tell one quick story. I told at the first meeting, was my first year here. There was a local, I don't know if it was a store owner or somebody that was involved in the community that was actively telling people not to send their kids to games. They were closing the building. And I had to go to this person's house. I found out who they were, and I said, why are you saying this? Stop saying this to people. Well, I just assume it's going to close. When people do that kind of stuff, it's a killer. And so it doesn't matter how many times we say it, people don't believe us, right? They think, oh, they really have a hidden agenda, or they, we don't have a hidden agenda. The agenda is very clear. Like, we got a problem. Now, what's going to happen with that, I don't know, but we're not beating around the bush about it. We're telling people this is a problem. That's why we're talking about it. So people don't want us to talk about it, right? but then they would accuse us of not talking about it, right? So it's difficult for us. So what we need is for the community to go out there and say, they are not closing it. It's open for this year. They're going to make a decision in March. Let's let this year play out. And the best thing you can do is send your kids to the building, right? I mean, that's absolute best case scenario. So take 1, 2, 3, 4. Start here.
Okay, I just have two real quick.
Okay.
One is, when will we know, now that we know that we're going to be open next year, we kind of know this, but when will we know teachers?
Oh, we know them. We have one opening that we still are going to have to hire for. Is that right? We know them right now. I think we can say it. They know, right? Okay, the question is, when will we know the teachers who are going to be in this building? So, Vanderlaan, Hanson, Butts, and Brookshire are going to be here. Butts, Kelly Butts. Yep. So, and then we have one opening. So that has to be filled still.
So the second question was kind of going back to Melissa's at the beginning about the early fives.
Yep.
So in the past years, there's the kids that were supposed to go to games that were not ready for kindergarten and did early fives have always been bused to the other schools that house for early fives.
Yep.
So how come we can't open a section here and have kids from the other elementaries bust here and house a class?
You could.
I mean, that'd be an extra classroom. We'd have a bit more students. I know somebody in the games district whose daughter went to early fives, and she was bused to Morrish, and then chose to stay at Morrish because the child had, established,
Right.
had friends and their stuff. So maybe if we had a classroom open here and bus kids here, maybe some people would like to stay there.
There is no doubt in my mind that you're correct. If we did that, that would be great for gains. But again, the question is, why would we take a group of 20 kids that are already in the Moorish area and ask them to be bussed out to gains? It would strictly just be to try and artificially bolster gains numbers, and that's difficult sell for us because we're going to be telling those parents, hey, I know you live right here and that building is already equipped to do it. So it has to make sense. If let's say they were on the bubble, let's say they had 35 kindergartners, right? Or let's just say it was 30. Say it was 30. But 12 of them were early 5 age. We might say, let's run like a K1 split. We'll take these 12, and then we'll see if there are others that are close that we could bus here to at least get that number to 17, 18. But you're talking about 16 kids right now. And so you can't really make a good case staffing-wise to make that move. And in the past when we've done it, it was when we started early 5, so like we would move kids from, say, Cyrene up to Deke. They would be bussed up there for early 5s. It was because that was the only early 5s we offered. Well, now we only have 2 buildings that are offering early 5s, and all the kids are congregated in those buildings, so you maximize your efficiencies in doing that. So that's kind of the answer to that. Yes?
Well, I was wondering if there's financially a number of students that you need here for a break-even point for the first and second scenario.
That's a great question. Certainly it's going to depend. It's a difficult thing to quantify. So I'll explain. Let's just say you got the number up to 160. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to keep thanks for reminding me. The question was, what's the magic number to break even on the slides, right? Like, what is the number that you'd need to get to have break-even point? The reason why this is difficult to quantify, if you got that number up to 140, let's just say it was 140, and we had no staffing changes, absolutely you'd be in good shape. Here's the problem. If you go up to 140, I can't staff the building with the same number of people I have. And every time I hire a teacher, it's $100,000. They don't make $100,000, but that's the cost of the district by the time you factor retirement, benefits, and everything else. So to get to that break-even point, there are a variety of different undulations, right? So you could say, well, we got to 140 and we didn't have to add any staff. You're probably doing really well. That's not realistic. So if you got to 140, but then you had to add a teacher, well, now you're kind of doing this. And so you're really trying to get it to maximum efficiency on staffing and the number of kids you need. And so that number is just going to be dependent on, well, how many of them are first graders? Because if I have to hire another first grade teacher, right, that doesn't make sense. But I got room in third grade, so you could bring me like 10 more third graders. I don't have to hire another teacher. That's just beautiful for efficiencies financially. So it's a difficult thing to peg, because as you go up in students, which is obviously, the more students you have, the better chance you have, but it also means that we invest in more staff, which is what we should do. So, you staff to your need. But I don't have a crystal ball answer to say it's exactly this number and this many people, because it's going to change depending on what grade level they're in, how many of them there are, if we're running a split or not running a split, so on and so forth. I think you were next, Jessica.
I just wanted to piggyback on Crystal's question about the survey. Is there a proper way to ask if there is assurance that gains will stay open when you send your kids here? Because I know several friends that send their kids to other schools in districts that say, oh, it sounds awesome out there, but their boyfriend's not going to do it. So is there a way, I know there's no assurance that they're going to actually choose to send them out here, even if you don't put that in the survey, but just if there's a possibility, if we know games is opening, your kindergartner will finish, would you send them to games?
So Katie.
Or like, what is the problem? Like, there's so many things that is so great on the survey to collect the information. If the answer is no, why? Did you get redistricted when you changed the building? Like,
Yep.
so many questions for the parents.
Yeah. So maybe you need a survey of survey questions. Like maybe we could get some input on some of the survey questions. That's not a bad idea. So. Oh, for sure, yeah.
So if you have people asking you, say they want to come to games and they're afraid it's going to close, tell them to come to games because it closed. I mean, that's what we need. Yeah.
They're considering private school now. Like my one
Yeah.
friend, she's like, I'm just going to go to Jersey Christian. I don't want to go to Jersey at whatever elementary they have.
So that's because they thought, you got someone saying, I want to go to games, but I'm so afraid they're going to close. Well, it's people like that that we need to come to games, because if people like that that are on the fence aren't willing to honestly take that chance.
But that's the idea. It's that I get a year, I get a year, I get 2 years.
Right, but the more people that come, the less likely this school is to close. So we're not
Yeah, so I will open it back up for further questions in a second. You had one, let me get to this question and then I'm going to go to our board members. So
I was going to make a suggestion that, from now until March is not a long time. 1 or 2 town halls are great. I think town halls are maybe hard for people to ask questions, or they may not want to speak up. A citizen work group would be great for this. You can bounce ideas off of people. They can suggest survey questions. They can listen to your plan. They can look at your marketing materials. They can do all that kind of stuff. Kind of like what we have for the bond oversight. I wouldn't suggest that it would just be games parents. It could be people from around Swartz Creek. But I think that would really show, because if you look at something like enrollment in game school from 2015 to now, that's 6 or 7 years. You can't bend the curve from now until March. To keep, it would be hard to say from now until March we're going to gain 50 more students or whatever. It's going to take a little bit of some planning, some time, some real decision making and analysis to figure out what we need to do. You can't just hope for the best, right?
yeah, so maybe put, you've got focus group up there. Yeah, so one of the things I know that I've had conversations with several of our members on the board, we did have a committee previously. Unfortunately, to say that it didn't go well would be an understatement, and it's led to this belief that the district was saying things, putting things out there that weren't transparent. Decisions are being made behind closed doors. I do think committees are great. I love our Citizens Oversight Committee. I think there's great benefit to some of those things. On this particular one, the tough one was just, man, it just crashed and burned so bad when they did it before. Not to say that we couldn't do it better. The other thing I would say is this year, and I'm saying this with all the love in my heart and due respect, we have a ton of major things that we are tackling as a district, right? We are trying to address learning loss for 3,700 kids, potentially. We are addressing a comprehensive strategic plan with our board. We are addressing massive initiatives across the district in math and reading. And so gains is definitely a part of the conversation, but it also can't dominate the district's business for the next 8 months, right? So that's part of the bigger picture conversation is we do need to look at data. We do need to have these, and maybe a focus group is something we do need to consider. But at the same time, I want you all to understand too that we're going to be out here, we're going to be accessible, keep letting us know, we'll send the surveys out. But at the same time, there are a lot of things going on in our school district right now, and gains is one of many. And so we can't afford to make that the only thing that we're able to address. And so that's part of the conversation that we're having as well. I want to give an opportunity, and I so appreciate, and I think that Alicia Gardner, who's in the back there, and Jack Sayer are both here. They're members on our board. I want to just give them a chance to introduce themselves, and maybe if you have some questions directly for them. They're part of the 7 that make the actual decisions on what happens. I just kind of advise, and I'm kind of like the cheerleader. I don't actually make any decisions as it relates to these big topic things. I shouldn't say I don't make any decisions, but I don't make these, building closing decisions. And so Alicia and Jack, gave up some time, and I'd love to give them a chance to just kind of introduce themselves to you and maybe share some of their heart on why they did what they did at the last board meeting. And then also, if you have any specific questions for them as board members, feel free to do that. And then after they're done, I will come back up, and if you have further questions, I'll be happy to take more at that time. So I don't know which one of you wants to start. So.
This one's high-tech.
You don't have to. You can just talk into it, whatever.
I'll borrow it, so I haven't necessarily talked as loud. But I'm Alicia Gardner. I'm a trustee on the Board of Education. I was voted in
2018?
Okay, I got backwards now. My term is until 2022 currently. And I obviously am a Swartz Street resident, but I welcome questions or feedback on share kind of where I was going into the decision.
Yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about, what thought went into the decision, and then anybody, I'll let Jack introduce himself, and then anybody here that has questions for these two, feel free to do that.
I will be, I think I always am, fairly transparent and honest. I was not very eager to make a very quick decision that does so greatly impact our families. Unfortunately, time is our worst enemy, and that is that we have several board members, we have our own lives and careers, and we have to work within those constraints too, but we also have to make decisions for the district at the times that make the most sense operationally. That being said, making decisions in November doesn't, that just doesn't help our families and our community. With the focus this past year, unfortunately, so heavy into just our safety, our constant changes on a day-to-day basis over COVID, it's not like this concern has not been looming. It's been looming every year I've actually lived in the district, in all honesty. It was, and as we can continue to be a successful community and district, we want to keep all the services that we have available. I will tell you that the heart of my core is to keep everything we ever have and just make them bigger and better. My priority is the students of this community, then it's the staff of this community, and then it's the community. And it's in that order. That's how I feel my elected position. That's how I rank my priorities. And I can say that students of the community because I do feel, truly honestly, for every single parent or every community member in East Village, but the numbers don't lie. There's 120 kids. We have a district of 3,600 kids. So we have a very, very, very difficult position to have to make sure that we're making the best investments in decisions across the district. Ben mentioned, you don't want to say, this is my favorite kid, and I'm not going to give you the same thing. I stand firm on whatever we're going to do, better speaks for everybody. Quality across our district is huge. I was a big proponent, and I will defend it to my grave. On the elementary model change, and first and foremost, because people see what they see, but not necessarily the entire district. That's our role to do. We need equality. We need to get everybody having the same opportunities. We need to expand our efficiencies and make our staff needs to be better and what they can do and how they can do it better. And there's just so many different moving parts. There's multiple things that come into the decisions that are made. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying we have 3,500 other students, however many families that equates to, keep in mind. So what's difficult is to say, yes, we want this, and we need to staff it, and we need to put the lights on and all of those things. If we can do that, we want to do that. But in doing that, I then have to go to the other 3,500 students and say, you can't have X, Y, and Z. Or I need to pull away from you X, Y, or Z. That's a really hard decision to choose. And we also have to just look at the longevity of our district, the investment into our community, and what's going to happen in our life. I appreciate that there are people that say they would come here if I had a guarantee, but just like Ben, I question that. But can you tell me you're going to stay here until the 12th grade year? You can't do that either. So we literally have to look at what we have before us, and then weigh all of those pluses and minuses to really, truly make the best decisions. Ultimately, the pushback that I was 100% in favor of, I will give all the kudos in the world to Jack for bringing it forward the way that it was presented. I will say I was trying to get there, but didn't know how to get there, and your suggestion was phenomenal from my perspective. Well, I wasn't ready to make a decision, but I didn't know how to not make that decision, because just chugging along is kind of what we keep doing. And you guys, small but mighty community, keep saying, I can't keep wondering. Well, we as a board can't keep wondering. We seriously have to start thinking about this. We're always thinking about it. We're always talking about it. And then sometimes, this last year's kind of a wash, but there's just a bigger priority that comes up. What we don't want to do is have to make a hasty decision. But it is what it is. We have to evaluate it. But we are in a position where it's okay for this year. But we've got to commit that we've got to do something to evaluate what are we going to do and how are we going to do it moving forward. Can't tell you what that is. I only have one piece of the pie in that decision. But to your question as well, okay, great, so you're going to have a couple town hall meetings. What else are we going to do? Truly, a lot of it is we need to collect the data, we need the feedback. I encourage this entire community to email every single one of us. I don't care if you blow up his phone, I'm your boss. We need that. We need the feedback. We need constructive feedback. I have challenged before in some of my conversations, bring your concerns, but I'd also like a solution, because if you can't come up with one to give us an idea, then we got to make our own. I think we have some really skilled heads to make some solution ideas, but we got to weigh it all. So please bring your ideas and your solutions forward so that we can throw them in the pot. There is so much work. Unless you want to come and sit on the other end of my phone and email in my house to see what we do on a daily basis and the communications we have back and forth and the committees that we have and the other staff in the district. doing tons of work. It's really hard to be, we're not hiding it, it's just, you don't want to see my entire schedule all the time. But there's a lot of work that gets done that you don't necessarily know about. So it's that data collection, it's the conversations, it's the community work, it's the feedback, it's the survey, it's the town hall meetings. It's just, we gotta have a timeline of some sort because we owe it to you in the community so you can prepare. Plus or minus, whatever that decision is going to be. I make no promises as to where that's going to go, but we do have an obligation to tell you we're looking at it and we're thinking about it. We're not ready to make a decision now, but here's your timeline. And I think like anybody, you kind of want to know when or if, and then even from that March decision, whatever that ends up being, then you've got some time to decide and make some changes then too. But to do it right before school starts didn't set well with anyone.
Sweet.
That's right.
I was going to maybe...
I just wanted to ask, when they go data collection and things like that, how we move in the right direction. It seems to start with the youngest kids, right? Like if we've got early fives and the younger kids to start coming here, the idea would be they would stay here. So I'm not trying to pick
can give it to Jack.
from other sides of the community, but how do we know where our Tory rules lie, for example? Like, I don't want to coach from other places, but I have 2 rounds of kids. I've got a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I can have a local early fives preschool option. I was going on the other side of the district because I had to go to Little Dragons, and that wasn't good for me. So I sent all my kids to Argentine. Well, I came back because it's local, but so I feel like there is family members with young kids here. Like, how do we collect that information? And if we had what number would we have to have to run an early five? Like we were saying, do we need 10 kids? Do we need 20 kids? Do we need 5 kids? Like, what's that number? How do we get the kids that aren't necessarily kindergarten registration?
Okay. So I want to speak to that and the information I use. So first of all, it's not just I'm just going to go without it because there's too much feedback. So if you can't hear me, let me know. I will speak of it, or I'll repeat it. So we have other information. We get it from the city. We get it from our taxes. We get it from the census that was just done. There are other ways that we get that data. We know who resides here, and relatively speaking, we get birth rates in our community, so we know there's X amount of new babies that we can project are going to be 5 years old by this date that should enter kindergarten. Now that family may homeschool, may private school, may do whatever, but we do have that information that we make projections on. That happens in municipalities across the country. So we do have other information besides just direct to those younger ones. You say, like, how do we know what they're going to do? We know those numbers. The other thing is drive around. In all honesty, where are the houses? They're not out here getting built. I mean, you may have one here and there, but it is the reality. And although you may have families that are vested in this community, it's kind of a one-for-one where we're not seeing growth in the actual development within the village. So eventually, one kid moves on, goes to high school, moves out, another family comes in. That's still a one-to-one when we start crunching the numbers. Where we're seeing growth and development and people coming into the community, unfortunately, are in our other areas, and it makes it really difficult. I'm just telling the truth. The other thing is, we have always been open, and to market or advertise, please come to Creek from other districts. And Gaines is an option, and they turn us down. They'll come here, but they don't want to have a
population of current or /5-year-olds that are here that are being underserved and shipped to another space. That's fine.
Sure. So I can answer briefly, and I think Alicia did a great job. I'll just add a couple things, and then I'll turn it over to Jack, and he can introduce himself. But I would tell you that we have numbers that come from any of the places Alicia talked to. We work with our hospitals, and so our ISD supports every year. We get a running number of birth rate projections, so we know who has been born and where those houses are. So we actually have a document that's provided that we go through every year, so we can kind of peg like how many kids we should be expecting that are going to be kindergarten age in every part of our district. The other part of that is that we advertise in the Flint Journal, we advertise in the View, we advertise on cars. What is it, 10 something? Yeah, we advertise on the radio, we advertise a lot of places to come to Swartz Creek Community Schools. It's been in the movie theaters, we've done videos, so we get the word out to as many places as possible. But like I was explaining earlier, we have people that come to us and said, yeah, I saw the school buses and decided I should bring my kid, and it's 2 weeks into school. So, it's just every parent is different. Some parents, especially if it's their first one, they don't know. So we work really hard on trying to get those kindergarten registrations out there. We were one of the only districts in the county running a face-to-face kindergarten registration this year. We're trying to get to those families and say, hey, look, we're here. Let's help you through the process. We'll be able to expand that this year, obviously, for springtime when we're looking at trying to reach out to those families again. But this was a tough year to do that. Let me turn it over to Jack. He can kind of introduce himself, and then I will still be able to take questions, or if you have questions specifically for them. You good? Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Sayer. You'll notice he keeps calling me Jack. Everyone sort of calls me Jack. That's been my nickname since I was born. I don't care what you call me. I'll kind of start here with the question over here. I kind of took that as maybe we're not putting enough priority into this. We have a bunch of town halls scheduled and all this. I'll start by saying this. It might have come up in the past as the board was kind of kicking this down the road, and they didn't really care enough, and the game was kind of a second thought. That's not how it is with me. So I'd ask Ben and Ms. Sue Gould to add this week, as well as further weeks from here. We're going to add the gains elementary discussions at hopefully every single board meeting from here on out. Until we figure out what we're actually doing here, and while I might annoy Ben and the other board members about it, gains is just as important to me as it would be to you guys. As I was elected not because of all the Elms people or the Deep people, but also all of you guys as well. So it is my goal to have this figured out. So I will just say, gains it's a priority, and just like all the other priorities, we're not going to kick the can down the road per se. We're going to keep going and figure this out. The other thing I kind of want to address is when I put forward the resolution to have us have a decision made by March, the way I kind of figured March out would be that would give families, in the worst case scenario we do close, that would give families 6 months to kind of figure out where we want to send our students, what we want to do here. And that's where my mindset was there. Again, that's the worst case scenario that we close it. Obviously, I don't speak for the rest of the board members. I don't want to close gains. That's not my goal. I'd love to keep it open. As Alicia and Ben have pointed out, though, the numbers, they don't lie. We have we assume 120-ish students. And we were talking about potentially closing down gains back when we had 250. The numbers don't lie. And I would hate to see gains closed. Obviously, I think everyone in this room would. But we do have a very tough decision to make here. Now, as Ben stated, we would be operating in a loss of around $100,000 if we kept it open full staff, which personally I don't think I could justify going for based on the current numbers. The split system that we're kind of working with and we're working with right now, while it's not perfect, it's an improvement over the full staff in terms of money. The community center one, again, this is why Alicia has stated, we're looking at it. I don't think I'm ready to make a decision yet, just as I think most of the board is either. It's quite tough, if you could imagine. You know, we have an entire school district basically telling us the opposite of what the other, you know, side of the district is telling us. Because, and again, not everything is monetary, but it's a lot. When you have, you know, taxpayers paying for Gaines Elementary to stay open, if it's, let's say, full staff, you know, those taxpayers are now paying for an operating loss, which, I mean, it's justifiable why they would be angry at that kind of situation. I realize now I didn't exactly tell you who I am, I just told you my name. I graduated from Swartz Creek in 2019. I'm 19 years old, and you know, I went to Cyrene as a kid, so that's where I come from. But I guess that's really all I have to say. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to answer them.
So I know there are probably some additional questions. If you guys want to address them specifically to a board member, if you want me to answer, or we'll just kind of tag team, I will concur with exactly what Jack and Alicia both said. The board was not ready to make a decision. That's why they were unanimous in supporting Jack's resolution. I can also tell you that I don't believe there's one single board member that wants to close Gaines. That's never come out of any mouth that I've heard. But I do know that they all would agree that this is a tough decision, as you've heard from them. So I know Alicia and Chuck were able to be here for our first meeting. It's great to have Jack and Alicia with us. If you have questions for... Sorry, Jessica and Chuck were here the first time. And so it's great to have that participation. But if you have questions that you want the board members to address, if you want me to address it, we can tag team it however you want to do it. So other questions? I know there were some hands. Yes?
So nobody wants to close it, but we discussed even if we brought numbers up to say 140, if they came from certain places, you have to hire additional staff, then we're back where we started from. So is there actually anything on the planet that happens where March comes and we're like, it looks good, guys, like going for another year? Like, what is it? Like,
Do you want to take it?
how do we help you make the decision of yes? That's what everyone wants to see.
Okay.
We understand the numbers don't lie, blah, blah, blah. So what can I give you to help you say this is worth it?
So, big elephant in the room is really what's the decision we're going to make.
Yes.
In all honesty, and this is about as truthful as I can be with you, we may say we are still not ready to make a decision right now. And now that might sound like we're kicking the can down the road. I will promise you it's not what's going to happen. What will happen is likely, if we are not ready to make that decision, we'll make another resolution and say, we're going to address it by this point once again. And it's just going to stay on the top of our minds. When, let's say the enrollment swings up this year, we go from 120 to 140. That looks great. So we could say at a meeting, hey, let's keep it open again, and let's keep looking into it, seeing where that data is going, because if it keeps on that upswing, that could change our direction in the future. So if this year we have an enrollment jump, let's say 150, let's be really, optimistic about it. If we have that enrollment jump, that would be great, and we can say down the line, hey, we did better this year, let's look towards next year. If we do better next year, we can keep on that upswing. That would be great, and that would influence our decision in the future. So that's, that upswing is really what I'm looking for here. I can't speak towards Alicia, but that upswing is what I'm looking for more than anything right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I can only speak for myself. I feel like I have relationships on that board for some years now, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that collectively, I think we agree. There needs to be that upswing. So people, bodies, absolutely, will always improve things. Income improves things. So I'll be honest with you, you probably have read the news and we're getting more money. So know that is news. They also cut in other areas, so it doesn't all balance. So that's what we do, is we just balance all of that information. So it's not just putting more kids in this building that will overall make it work. So I guess to answer, everybody wants to know a yes or a no.
Right, like
Right.
the main complaint is that everybody just gets one
I just,
time.
Yep.
No one invests.
but I will be honest with you,
1 year.
even a yes can only be a yes for a year. I mean, and that is how it will be forever. We cannot make commitments beyond that year. We never know what happens.
We could discover.
Last year,
we-
we were going to go to school August 28th, and guess what? We couldn't, because something changed.
We could discover hazardous waste on Deke Elementary School's playground, and Deke Elementary's got to close forever. Like, those parents, us, we don't know that's coming, but like, I mean, and there's no hazardous waste at Deke Elementary. I'm just saying, like,
Better not be.
you gotta understand that, like, we cannot possibly predict it. But I think, to your point, and they both answered it, I don't think anyone's sitting there saying, because your baseline is 139, that's your pre-COVID number. Your projection is 120 right now, and 120 is scary, and that's why we're having this conversation. So if you get back to your, if you see that swinging, now you're in the 140s, now you're in the 150s, at least the board has data to say there's improvement. Why would we not continue to, like, if this curve is turning, let's at least look at the improvement and say, oh, is this enough growth that they're going to get to 170 next year? And then we see that number coming back.
At this point, like we had discussed at the last meeting that we were asking for like a 3-year or a 5-year promise, just because what upswing are we going to get within a year? Like post-pandemic and everything, and you're like, we've got so many things going on. Like, why is this the time to change it? We can't give it more than March. We're not going to see it, so you might as well just call it. I feel like it feels meaning.
Well, I think there's actually a huge, we talked about it over here. There's people who are like, okay, if they're open this year, I'm sending my kid. There are also people that are like, unless I have a 3-year commitment, I'm not sending them. We cannot program or plan for every individual's circumstance. That's just impossible. So.
Let me bounce off actually what Melissa said a little bit earlier. If you're saying they're going to close games in 2 years, 3 years, so I'm not sending my child there, that's not exactly a solution either. We need more enrollment in Gainesville, okay? If you're saying they're going to close it in 2 years anyways, so I'm not sending my kid there, well, we're losing that enrollment, right?
It's just that I have an upcoming person.
I get it.
So that's my time.
Right.
That's on our early childhood timeline, is that we're basing it on the education of our tiny people.
Right.
So that's why we're looking for more than 1 year at a time, because I don't want my kid to go to 4 different elementaries.
I hate to kind of repeat what's been said again and again and again. Even me, as optimistic as I like to be, I can't justify giving, I can't justify saying 5 years down the line, we won't have this problem again. I can't morally tell you that I can promise this, because if I did that, you're asking me to basically say, for not just specifically you, but the community out here, you're asking me to basically say, no matter what happens, we could run a deficit of $200,000, we will keep this building open. I can't say that, Right.
Upswing than
Yeah.
March.
Well,
Fair.
so I will say, you're asking, like, just call it. And I want to be honest with the community, we did. Our call was, we're not closing. That was our decision. We are open for the 21-22 school year. What we're giving you is we're not going to surprise you. I didn't mean to use that word, but that's
Yeah,
kind
no, I
of
was
what's
afraid
up.
that come August, you guys were going to be like, no. Like, I was so prepared for a last minute, like, the elementary
So we made a decision. We are good. We are going to stay open for the next calendar year. We're also giving you you can anticipate the decision for the following school year by whatever that date is, March 22nd or whatever it is. So we're trying to give you more information. But I will back up and tell you, like, those decisions can be every year and have been every year. I completely understand where you're coming from, And it's very scary, it's very difficult as a mom and as a parent in general. My kid went to 2 different elementary schools and 3 different child care centers. Not because that's what I wanted to do, but because I got a letter in the mail that said, your child's going to be enrolled in Morris Elementary School. And I thought, what? Actually, when I built my house, and I was zoned, and I was Morris Elementary School. He was 3 and a half. By the time he was 4 years old, I get the letter in the mail with my teacher, and I signed films. And I actually called the district, I'm like, what the heck? That gets refigured every single year based on all that other information that I told you about before. So those lines, Ian, are really only good for the current school year, and we have to reevaluate where people live and where the population is, and then we have to look at the transportation map and our staffing, and there's so many different factors. Legitimately, these decisions can happen every year. It's not comfortable to the community member that may be impacted in that, but those do happen. They happen. And we have, so what we're giving you is that the only guarantee we can give you is that we're not done talking about it, and that we would have to revisit it looking for that upswing.
I won't say the name of the district because I will never, I don't know, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but I had a conversation about 2 or 3 weeks ago with a superintendent, and he's in this county. It's a very large, prominent district that everybody feels is very successful, and their elementary selection process, so you might live in this area of the district, and it's a big district, or you might live over here. Every year they do a lottery draw and they decide where kids are going to go to elementary school, and it is never guaranteed that it's by your house. Like, you could literally be on this end of the district and go to elementary school up here because that's where the numbers worked out. And once you're there, you stay there. But that's kind of the way they do all of their elementary school placement. There is no home elementary school. You don't move into an area and get one. They just distribute them. So there's places that do a lot of wonky things that would really, in my opinion, cause a lot of upheaval that we don't do. But, you know, we're trying to give as much advance notice as possible. I believe you had a question.
I have 2 actually.
Sure.
One is, why couldn't we say, okay, yeah, maybe you would have to make a decision at some point about closure. But last time we talked about, if you decided to do closure, about making it a 5-year plan so that the kids can finish out, and then maybe people would be happy to send their kids. Why couldn't it be something like that, where we're saying at least you have a few years down the road, and maybe you don't have to go out 5 years, maybe you go 3 years, you know, something like that.
250
where you're not bringing more kids in, like a new kindergarten, but you're allowing the kids to go to
Yeah.
So that's my first thing. And my second thing, I forgot.
You want to write that?
Yeah.
That is a great suggestion. I honestly would add it to the list. But I'll be honest with you, with 250 kids here, you would have to make transitions of kids. We were the ones that had a decision then. There's just a lot more.
Took a time out.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I did remember my first thing. My second thing was, if the other schools are operating as positive, why couldn't we redraw the district map a little bit and bring some of those kids that live fairly close to us here, and maybe they wouldn't be as much in the black as they always were, but then maybe they wouldn't be as much in the red either. Why isn't that on the table?
It's always on the table. A lot of them will. That's the
truth, but if you can speak to more too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. We've done that. We're going to do this again and ask people that would like to come out here, whether they drive their kids or even if they can hop on a bus. Alicia said this earlier. For every single school of choice student that we get, when we go to place them, they don't get to choose where they go. Elms Road often fills up and Moorish fill up. They're our two largest elementary schools. They're operating at like 450 up to 500 kids, and they're big elementary schools. So we'll oftentimes have school of choice applications. So they might be coming from Linden or Flushing or anywhere, Carmen. And we'll get them and we'll say, hey, we've got room at Gaines, right? So we're offering them to go to Gaines. Since I've been here, that's probably happened to me about 30 or 40 times. I've not had one of those children come to the district. They don't want to come from 30 minutes away. It's not a real popular decision. So.
I'm talking about like the kids on Moorish Road that are being bused other places instead of to us like they were 2 years ago. Right. But the little hub, not like way out.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Close, like people.
Yeah. You're talking about a number that's under 10, but yes, there are a few.
But hey, that would get us to the look. We're close
Yeah.
on 140, and I'm going to say yes.
That's right.
All we need is you guys to pick those kids up off Moorish Road and bring them back. Then everything changes.
Yep.
Right, that's good. And that'll get my kids to second grade, and then I won't have to struggle.
Yes.
So, I have a few things, you don't have to answer any of them, I just have a couple comments. First one, I did talk to the majority of the people that were sent to another school. The majority of them would love to come back here, but because the bus no longer picks them up where they used to pick them up, and I know it's only 8 families, so it could be anywhere between 10 kids, 10 to 15 students. They don't have transportation here anymore because that transportation has now been moved and it's further away from them. So they would still love to come here, but because of logistics and the bus moving, they can't get here now. So if they picked them up where they previously picked them up, they would still be our students instead of bringing them to us. 2, the modern ad that we did last school year, 2 school years ago, that was phenomenal and people loved it. I don't know the statement that was accurate that it didn't pan out well because then we had COVID. So that had to stop right then and there. And 2021, we all know was different. So we didn't continue that modern ad. But I would be curious to see what would have happened if we could have continued that.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'll recant that. I mean, I don't want to say it didn't work out well. We didn't see the better way to say it is we didn't see any type of increased enrollment because we hit COVID. Right. So yeah, it's a good point. I think it was an incredibly successful program.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
And also, when we open up this fall, will we be renting out the gym space? Is that going to be a thing? Because that's the money generator for the school.
Yeah, our facility rentals will be back on. Yep.
That will be back on.
Yep.
Facility rentals are by the hour. I looked it up while I was.
Yeah. Yep.
If you are school related, it is $15 an hour.
Yeah, I know we have.
If you are not, it is $35. If you do that every year, our request is $140,000.
I know we have a family in the village that rents the gym out every Friday to the tune of like $100. They rent it for 2 hours. So, I mean, $100, I know that's like $400 a month. If you add that up, you're looking at $4,000 a year for just one day. $4,800 a year for just one night of rental. So, and I know that's not a crazy amount, but if you're looking at a deficit of $22,000, that could be where that money is made up by renting out the gym. It rents out the flags, it rents out the baseball, it rents out the, I don't know if lacrosse has to pay when they come here.
No. So if they're school related, they do not.
Okay.
There are $35 for a non-school function person to rent it. So like, our birthday parties could be here.
Yes.
Where's the advertisement for that?
We don't advertise it because it's a loser. We don't advertise it because it's a financial loser. So, but we do it. We do it across the district. But like, yeah, for example, Moorish Elementary School, you want to rent the cafeteria, gym, whatever. Yeah, you can. Have your party in there. $35 an hour. It does. I know. Yep. Go ahead.
Brought up the peak meeting. I was part of that peak meeting. It was a fiasco because it was literally 50 people. It was insanely ridiculous. It was two people from every school. It was stupid. If you do a focus group and you have a minimum amount of your boards or your little committees, if you were to do something like that, 4 games to focus just on the school and just from the district, not from everybody else in the school, it would probably work. But when you're trying to get 30, 40 people together in a room and talk about how to create increase enrollment, it just doesn't, that didn't work. So that's why that was such a fiasco.
Okay.
A small focus group would probably work.
Okay.
And to get the word out there. And honestly, anybody here, if you talk to someone like, I don't want to say who's their coach, send your sneaking kids games. We love them. I don't call them sneaking. So I have 6 hours to sleep over. Send them here because that's why we are in the situation we are, because people hear through the grapevine that games is going to close and they don't send their kids. So unless we can turn that around, we're not going to open. I don't envy the board, the decision they have to make. It's a tough one. I understand where you're coming from, and I think we all do. I've been in your position because I was here the first time with my little kids, and it's heart-wrenching. It's hard. And then I could see past my kids at that point. Now I see it is emotional, but it's also financial, and I get it. I don't envy your decision. It's not any one particular board member that has to make this choice. The way this board is going about it is a lot better than the way the previous board was about it. So I think that might be better.
And honestly, in the promotion, I will say, how do we increase enrollment? You gotta get people to invest in Creek.
Right.
It's not investing in games. It's not, I want my kid to go to games. It's that we want them to go to Creek because they don't just need to come into this building. They need to stay in this district. And they need to continue.
We have so many talking points about our secondary buildings that are just ridiculous. We offer more sports. We offer more AP classes. Our kids are scoring phenomenally on AP tests. We're getting kids into Harvard and Ivy League schools every single year. Our middle school is completely turned around. You wouldn't even recognize it from 5 years ago. We are building brand new facilities. There is no excuse for somebody to not come to our secondary buildings, but that's happening. So that also has to be a part of the conversation because it's a big ball of wax. This is about Swartz Creek as a family, not just Gaines Elementary School, and that's why that's all a part of the conversation.
Maybe that needs to be part of the survey.
Yeah, I think so. We got time for 2 more?
I just have a quick conversation. The reason I bring up games is because this community seems to send their children to Byron or Grant or Linden or Lake Fenton. That's why I say we need to work on bringing those kids back here and not sending them to those other districts at a early age. We don't have that problem at Elms or Cyrene or Deep. They don't go to whatever, Fenton or Flushing. They don't do that at those other schools for the most part.
They do
Not as much. And we steal some from the others. I mean, it's a game, right? I mean,
we don't get it anybody. That's why I say we need to concentrate on those games because games students seem to disperse to the other outline.
yeah.
And I mean, the biggest realistic reason for that, I mean, it's got to be transportation. From this building to our middle school is about 14, 15 minutes.
Do you want my honest answer why people don't go to the middle school?
I would love to hear it. I'd honestly love to hear it.
They don't go to the middle school because in school of choice and the students who come from County. That's what this district is. And I don't think we're going to school of choice because that brings more money in for our district. I understand why you have that. This community sees that as a reason to not send their kids to school.
In order to increase enrollment, we need more kids, and we're gonna pull kids from other areas. Like, you're also not gonna have, the people that choose to get in the car and drive their kids out here because the class size is smaller. That doesn't make sense, and I'll be honest with you, we argue in union meetings too, because how is that fair also to our staff of a 3rd grade teacher that has 17 and a 3rd grade teacher that has 29? It's a really hard conversation to have. We have to that in mind too, that, you know, even if we were to right size everything, you're also not gonna have the comfy low class sizes either, so it changes the whole perspective. So then how many people would leave because you now want my kid in a classroom with 25 kids? So there's a lot of pros and cons on both sides. That's why we want this feedback, the list of other ideas. Sorry, I could keep
No,
going.
you're good.
I will say, to your
And
point,
then he seriously has been trying
I
to
even
talk.
personally know, like some of my friends who went to different districts and graduated, I know that there are people who legitimately left our district to go to different districts simply for that reason. So absolutely, you're correct. That is a factor that some parents, maybe they don't feel comfortable or safe or what have you because of that. So you are 100% spot on with that.
Please. Do you get data on children who come here and then go to other places? Are you able to do targeted outreach to those families and say, you know, we passed a bond, here's what we're doing in middle school, here's what we're doing in high school, all those things you just said. Do we have the data to look at school of choice applications from our district to other places and targeted outreach to those families?
Every year when we have a student that chooses to leave us, and I would say there's vastly, vastly more people that come to us than leave us, but when we do have that, there is absolutely always somebody reaching out from the building or the district office to say, what could we do differently? How, you know, and we absolutely do that. What we don't do, and it's not a bad idea, it just hasn't been operationalized, is to say, for the last 3 years, the kids that left, could we do like a specific mailer or something like that, you know, and that's not a bad idea. So I think marketing, Katie, would be a good thing to add there to those that left.
You know, pictures of our brand new football field. And
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if Byron has passed the bond or what, you know, but
No, and I mean, if you drive by our middle school and high school right now, they look pretty torn up, but they are going to be state-of-the-art facilities. I mean, it's phenomenal. So, and the kids that come through here will get to benefit with that if they go to our school district. But yes.
Okay, 2 questions. My first one is, I know I've talked to you about it the first time I met you. I'm a farm person, I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
Big farm family, right? And the only reason I wanted to move my kids was because of FFA. Shiawassee County has FFA programs, Future Farmers of America. We don't have that here. And I would stay, or I would think about staying, and I'm not saying I'm moving for sure eventually, if we can attempt to start something like that. And that's why we started Modern Ag here, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We brought our farm beer trailers, our Michigan farm beer trailers here and everything. It was huge. But it was fantastic. Other areas, we had all our projects lined up. We were going to make chickens and eggs and eggs. Yeah, and we can still do that.
is that a high school program? No, I'm sorry.
Well, the Modern Ag is FFA is, yeah.
FFA is a Future Farmers of America. It's high school based. Let's add, did you add that? What I will do is I'll talk with our high school staff to see if we could put out a call. Like, to my knowledge, there's never been a request for it, you know? But we certainly would not turn down the opportunity. It's kind of one of those things where kids usually approach us and they say, we want to have a club we have a high school Bible club. You know, they wanted to start a club, right? So the kids say, we want to start a Bible club, or we want to start a Young Conservatives or Young Democrats or whatever. There's a ton of clubs, and the kids are usually the ones that start them. We almost never say no unless it's not aligned with the district vision or there's a conflict with finding a staff member that can sponsor it. But one of the questions that we ask is how many kids would participate in this? So, I think that's... What'd you say?
Yes.
Well, we do. And actually, it's not just Gaines. Also, the Deke area has the Deke farm. And I've been in those barns, and so I understand it. The issue is we can put that call out there. I don't know how many kids have considered it, thought about it, asked about it. I'd be surprised if anyone asked about it and we said, no, we're not doing that. I mean, that would be rare form for us, but what we'll do is we'll add that to a conversation with the high school team.
I know, I don't think it's ever been brought up,
Right,
so they don't even know much about it.
right.
Now, I know that we used to have a chapter of the FFA because my family, I'm a fourth generational graduate from Swartz Creek. My dad was in the FFA when he was a kid, so I know for a fact we did have it at some point. I'd like to see it come back. Of course, again, like Ben said, a lot of clubs are started by our students. Now, I know a lot of students. I could, try and do something with it. Say, hey, what would you think if we started a chapter of the FFA here at the high school? Would you like that? Would you join that? And we could try and get something worked out like that. And I could even be a part of that because I know so many of our students on a personal level. So I could go with that.
This past year, even in the pandemic, because we planned it before the pandemic hit, we started our own in-house construction program, and that's really taken off. There's a lot of kids that are interested in that. So this would probably be pretty similar. There's a large group of people that would probably be interested. So yeah, we can definitely do that. And you had one more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where's our air conditioning at?
Yeah. For this meeting?
For the building.
Oh, for the building. Yeah. So we technically do have plans to put air in for this fall. And to be frank, it's about a $700,000 price tag to put air in this building with full infrastructure. That means we're tearing out, and we just felt like until we have a better answer on what this is going to do, it's inexcusable to spend $700,000 in infrastructure on that, which is why we have a temporary fix, which is getting the classrooms cooled with a fully appropriate, we do this in our district right now. So we have some kids, for example, that have IEPs that require, and so there's a unit that goes, it's a window-mounted unit, cools the classroom, brings in outside air. So that's kind of our solution for now. If over the course of the next couple years there's a decision that's more permanent, then we would go back to saying, okay, now's the time to make that investment. We have invested a lot of money in the school already with bond dollars, but that was a price tag I think the committee felt a little too steep with the uncertainty of seeing those numbers, precipitously dropping. And so I think the upswing would help that conversation. And we're going to have more money coming from the federal government for these air quality solutions and things like that too. So the money will be there. It's just really a matter of what's the board want to do long term, and then we'll make a more significant investment.
Upcoming year, whatever you decided to do though, right? Something.
We'll have air. We'll have air this year in the classrooms. You're never going to have it in here. Yeah, but you'll have it in the classrooms. Yep.
If I may rewind a little bit, I didn't mean to lie to you, but my dad was not in FFA, he was in 4-H.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to lie to you, but again, I would be willing to and more than happy to try and get FFA chapter started in our high school.
FFA is like 4-H on steroids.
Yeah.
It's more like an NHS.
Yeah.
So that's one draw to unfortunately.
For sure.
So I was hoping this was just maybe an oversight, maybe something in the administration building that didn't know what they were talking about. I live in Ellsworth. We choose to go to games, and we were grandfathered in last year when the order changed. When I called the administration building this year to ensure that my kids were to be enrolled again next year for games, they told me that we do not do inter-district school of choice. And I was like, okay, and I quickly emailed Katie, and she was, quick on that and said, yes, your kids are going to be coming. But I am worried that maybe other parents, are going to have the same issue.
So you
Was that like a miscommunication?
you are the person you are the case, the test case, because we got word of that and we corrected it right away. So we are not doing elementary choice across the district, except for if you want to come to Gaines. So the person that told you what they told you was doing their job, they just didn't have the full picture, right? So when we corrected it, they should have reached out to you, or somebody was supposed to reach out to you, but yeah. So, so that you knew that that was a possibility. We last year stopped with choice primarily because with COVID and the new model, it was impossible for us to kind of figure those things out. We've never shut down choice to gains. That's not our intent. I mean, obviously, the more kids we can get to come out here, the better. So, yeah. Any other things?
So, I know that things are designated in certain places, but say we're on the air conditioning in here, we're not operating at a loss, and we're going to decide, is that $700,000 set for gains?
That $700,000 bond money, that bond money cannot go into our general fund, and we cannot use it on anything else besides construction that was already agreed upon legally.
So it's a building maintenance.
It is specific to,
Yes.
not even maintenance, we can't even do maintenance. I can't go into a building and fix something of before if it wasn't included in what we requested to the state of how we were going to use those funds.
It's,
What happens if the building closes? Where does that money go?
Into other projects.
So there's not a, it's different than what you're thinking. It's not like this building has this much money and this building has this much money. The district has a pot of money, and they have to spend it on very specific things. Air conditioning is one thing we could spend the money on, whether we chose to spend the money here or we spend it in another building or somewhere else. So it's all in the big pot. There's not a gains pot that's sitting there. But from the big pot, what we're saying is until we know longevity and long term to do major infrastructure, it's just not prudent to say, you're going to invest that kind of and then close it down. That would be foolish. So, but we do want air in the classrooms for the kids because, again, when we talk about equity and we're talking about the kids at Moorish getting something, we want the kids at Gaines to have that also. So that's why those are coming this fall. But to do for example, our high school this next year is still not going to be air conditioned. That's on the schedule of plans. Our middle school will. So, is it fair for them or not? We can only execute these things at such a speed, right? But
and when we say things have to be specific with spending, we got grants for COVID relief money this year, and we had to spend X amount of dollars specifically on paper, tissues, bathroom supplies, that kind of thing. Like, it is down to exactly what we are spending it on. Mm-hmm. That's when we say specific, it is that specific.
Yeah, highly, highly regulated. So,
Melissa?
Any other questions or comments you want from us? Okay, so next steps. We are going to get this year kicked off and have the greatest school year ever. I'm really excited to get the kids back into these buildings. We have so many of our elementary school kids, almost zero elementary students are going to be online this year. And I think that's fantastic. Not that if it's the right thing for your family, but what I'm saying is we know it's good for kids. So our elementaries, our families are going to be able to go into the buildings. They couldn't go into the buildings this year. So it's just going to be a much better situation this year. So I'm excited about that. So we're going to kick the year off and have a great start. We will be communicating out with you again when we'll have more meetings. If we're going to start a focus group, you're going to see that survey. So there'll be some things kind of going on. As Alicia and Jack have said, obviously reach out to us, send them letters, send me information. We'll pass it on. We'll keep that thing going. And you know that in March, you'll be able to know that that's kind of their deadline for deciding whatever they're going to decide at that point. But there's quite a bit to do from then until there. So with that, we're going to close. We'll be around. Do you have anything you want to say?
As I did say, though, we are going to, and I'm going to be annoying the rest of the board members because it's what I do. I'm going to make sure that every single month on our board agenda, we are going to be talking about Gaines Elementary, and we're going to keep talking about it until we figure this out because it's a priority to us. It's a priority to all of you. We're not going to forget about it. We're not going to kick it down the road. I won't let them. You guys won't let us. This Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Last time too, it was like spam right after, and I had no idea. And I was like, I would love, are you still like recording Zoom, remind it on?
Yes. Well, we're not on Zoom.
They're
but we're
recorded, they're
recording.
all recorded, they always have been.
Yeah. They're on YouTube, they're live streamed.
Yeah. Yeah, you can come check out the boardroom.
And
It's
we
nice.
do our entire yearly calendar, and it is posted on the website. It is there from January on, every year. We can't change those meetings unless we enact them. Some months have two, but yes, there's at least one a month, and then it would say if there's any kind of special meeting or something different. Like we have an organizational meeting, we literally are working on our calendar, we don't do anything else.
Is there ever anybody that requests that we, like, as a district, email everybody, like, school board meeting? Do you not want everybody to come to your meeting? Like, is there a way to, like, advertise them more? Like, I get a newsletter, hey, Gaines Town Hall meeting this day. Can I get a notification when you guys are here? Like, hey, reminder, if anybody's interested, school board meeting.
I don't think there's anybody that would not be happy to have people participate. It's usually like on the list of people's things they enjoy doing on Wednesday nights, it's usually not that. So,
I'll tell you what, though, that is a great idea.
Because you guys have
like to
just
see it.
quite a few times, and it's just because of my predicament, you know, I'm obviously more invested than maybe the average.
yeah.
But
That's usually how it happens.
Yeah,
And then
so-
I won't see you years from now. But.
So one of the things you can do is subscribe to our district calendar, and if you do that, you'll get an alert, and board meetings are on that. So you'll get like a blast that'll be like, hey, board meeting coming up this week. So it's all integrated into that system. So we have a lot of people that hear about that.
I sync it to my calendar, and if something changes, you find out. But you also get like, it's a half day, or it's a,
You're going to find out that like the middle school's on a half day, and you know, all that stuff.
but you do get all of it.
Mhm.
That truly is probably, I bug him anytime that I have something on my personal calendar that isn't on the district calendar, so, yeah.
Yes. So,
Board meeting is not on there for this Wednesday. It was on last time.
yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, we'll stick around for a few minutes if you have additional things, but thank you for coming, and we'll see all of you hopefully in the fall, and we'll be ready to talk further. Have a great day.